"That's the truth of it, all right," agreed Big Ma. "But when Mr. Jameson died in 1918 and Wade come head of the family, he sold them 200 acres to Pa Edward and the rest of his land to Harlan Granger and moved his family into Strawberry. He could have just as easy sold the full 1,000 acres to the Grangers and got more money, but he didn't. Until this day, Harlan Granger's still holding it against him, 'cause he didn't." The soft swish of falling leaves made Big Ma look up from the pond and at the trees again. Her lips curved into a tender smile, and she looked around thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "I can still see my Pa Edward's face the day Mr. Jameson sold him them 200 acres. He put his arms around me and looked out at his new piece of land. Then he said exactly the same thing he said when he grabbed himself that first 200 acres. Said, 'Pretty Caroline, how you like to work these fine pieces of earth with me?' Sho did, said the exact same thing." She grew quiet then, and rubbed the wrinkles down one hand as if to smooth them away. I gazed at the pond, glassy gray and calm, until she was ready to go on. I had learned that at times like these it was better to just sit and wait than to go on asking disrupting questions which might vex her. "So long ago now," she said eventually, in a voice that was almost a whisper. "We worked real hard getting them crops sown, getting 'em reaped. We had us a time. But there was a good times, too. We was young and strong when we started out, and we liked to work. Neither one of us, I'm proud to say, never was lazy, and we didn't raise us no lazy children either. Had ourselves 6 fine children. Lost our girls when they was babies, though. I suppose that's one of the reasons I love your sweet mama so much. But them boys grew strong, and all of them loved this place as much as Pa Edward and me. They go away. They always come back to it. Couldn't leave it." She shook her head and sighed. "Then Mitchell got killed in the war, and Kevin got drowned." Her voice faded completely, but when she spoke again it had hardened, and there was a determined glint in her eyes. "Now all the boys I got is my baby boys, your papa and your Uncle Hammer, and this is they's place as much as it is mine. They's blood in this land, and here that Harlan Granger is always talking about buying it. He pestered Pa Edward to death about buying it. Now he pestered me. Humph!" she grumped angrily. "He don't know nothing about me on this land. Think I'm going to sell." She became quiet again. A cold wind rose, biting through my jacket, and I shivered. Big Ma looked down at me for the first time. "You cold?" No, ma'am," I stuttered, not ready to leave the forest. "Don't you be lying to me, girl," she snapped, putting out her hand. "It's time we was going back to the house anyways. Your mama'll be home soon." I took her hand, and together we left the Caroline. Despite our every effort to persuade Stacy otherwise, when Mama came home he confessed that he'd been fighting TJ at the Wallace store, and that Mr. Morrison had stopped it. He stood awkwardly before her, disclosing only those things which he could honorably mention. He said nothing of TJ's cheating, or that Christopher John, Little Man, and I had been with him, and when Mama asked him a question he could not answer honestly, he simply looked at his feet and refused to speak. The rest of us sat fidgeting nervously throughout the interview, and when Mama looked our way, we swiftly found somewhere else to rest our eyes. Finally, seeing that she had gotten all the information she was going to get from Stacy, "I suppose you 3 went to the store too, huh?" But before any of us could squeak an answer, she exclaimed, "That does it!" and she began to pace the floor, her arms folded, her face crossed. Although she scolded us severely, she did not whip us. We were sent to bed early, but we didn't consider that a punishment, and we doubted that Mama did either. How we had managed to escape a whipping we couldn't fathom until Saturday, when Mama woke us before dawn and piled us into the wagon. Taking us south toward Smelling's Creek, she said, "Where we're going the man is very sick, and he doesn't look like other people, but I don't want you to be afraid or uncomfortable when you see him. Just be yourselves." We rode for almost 2 hours before turning onto a backwoods trail. We were jarred and bounced over the rough road until we entered a clearing where a small, weathered grade house stood and fields stretched barren beyond it. As Mama pulled up on the reins and ordered us down, the front door cracked warily open, but no one appeared. Then Mama said, "Good morning, Miss Barry. It's Mary Logan, David's wife." The door swung wide then, and an elderly woman, frail and toothless, stepped out. Her left arm hung crazily at her side, as if it had been broken long ago but had not mended properly, and she walked with a limp. Yet she smiled widely, throwing her good arm around Mama and hugging her. "Land sakes, child, ain't you something!" she exclaimed. "Coming to see about these old bones. I just says to Sam, I says, who you reckon coming to see old folks like us? These yo babies, ain't they? Lord A'mighty, ain't they fine? Sho is!" She hugged each of us and ushered us into the house. The interior was dark, lit only by the narrow slat of gray daylight allowed in by the open door. Stacy and I carried cans of milk and butter, and Christopher John and Little Man each had a jar of beef and a jar of Crowder peas, which Mama and Big Ma had canned. Mrs. Barry took the food, her thanks intermingled with questions about Big Ma, Papa, and others. When she had put the food away, she pulled stools from the darkness and motioned us to sit down. Then she went to the back seat, blackest corner, and said, "Daddy, who you s'pose done come see about us?" There was no recognizable answer, only an inhuman guttural wheezing. But Mrs. Barry seemed to accept it and went on, "Mis' Logan and her babies. Ain't that something?" She took a sheet from a nearby table. "Gots to cover him," she explained. "He can't hardly stand to have nothing touching him." When she was visible again, she picked up a candle stump and felt around a table for matches. He can't speak no more. The fire burned him too bad, but he understands all right. Finding the matches, she lit the candle and turned once more to the corner. A still form lay there staring at us with glittering eyes. The face had no nose, and the head no hair. The skin was scarred, burned, and the lips were wizened black, like charcoal. As the wheezing sound echoed from the opening that was a mouth, Mama said, "Say good morning to Mrs. Barry's husband, children." The boys and I stammered a greeting, and then silently trying not to stare at Mr. Barry during the hour we remained in the small house. But Mama talked softly to both Mr. and Mrs. Barry, telling them news of the community as if Mr. Barry were as normal as anyone else. After we were on the main road again, having ridden in thoughtful silence over the wooded trail, Mama said quietly, "The Wallaces did that, children. They poured kerosene over Mr. Barry and his nephews and lit them afire. One of the nephews died. The other one is just like Mr. Barry." She allowed this information to penetrate the silence, then went on. "Everyone knows they did it, and the Wallaces even laugh about it, but nothing was ever done. They're bad people, the Wallaces. That's why I don't want you ever to go to their store again, for any reason. You understand?" We nodded, unable to speak, as we thought of the disfigured man lying in the darkness. On the way home we stopped at the homes of some of Mama's students, where families poured out tenant shacks to greet us. At each farm Mama spoke of the bad influence of the Wallaces, of the smoking and drinking permitted at their store, and asked that the family's children not be allowed to go there. The people nodded and said she was right. She also spoke of finding another store to patronize, one where the proprietors were more concerned about the welfare of the community. But she did not speak directly of what the Wallaces had done to the Barrys, for, as she explained later, that was something that wavered between the known and the unknown, and to mention it outright to anyone else, outside of those with whom you were closest, was not wise. There were too many ears that listened for others besides themselves, and too many tongues that wagged to those that they shouldn't. The people only nodded, and Mama left. When we reached the Turner farm, Moe's widowed father rubbed his suppled chin and squinted across the room at Mama. "Mis' Logan," he said, "you know I feels the same way you do about them low-down Wallaces, but it ain't easy just stop shopping there. They overcharges me, and I has to pay them high interest, but I got credit there, 'cause Mr. Montier signs for me. Now, you know most folks around here is sharecropping on Montier, Granger, or Harris land, and most of them just about got to shop at Wallace store or up at the Mercantile in Strawberry, which is just about as bad. Can't go no place else." Mama nodded solemnly, showing she understood. Then she said, "For the past year now our family's been shopping down at Vicksburg. There are a number of stores down there, and we found several that treat us well." "Vicksburg?" Mr. Turner echoed, shaking his head. "Lord, Miss Logan, you ain't expecting me to go all the way to Vicksburg. That's an overnight journey in a wagon down there and back." Mama thought on that a moment. "What if someone would be willing to make the trip for you? Go all the way to Vicksburg and bring back what you need." "Won't do no good," retorted Mr. Turner. "I got no cash money. Mr. Montier signs for me up at the Wallace store so's I can get my tools, my mule, my seed, my fertilizer, my food, and what few clothes I needs to keep my children from running plumb naked. When cotton picking time comes, he sells my cotton, takes half of it, pays my debt up at the store and my interest for the credit, then charges me 10 to 15% more as risk money for signing me in the first place. This year I earned me near $200 after Mr. Montier took half his crop of money, but I ain't seen a penny of it. In fact, if I manages to come out even without owing that man nothing, I figures I've had a good year. Now who way down in Vicksburg going to give man a credit like that?" Mama was very quiet and did not answer. "I sho sorry, Mis' Logan. I'm going to keep my young'uns from up at that store, but I gots to live. Y'all better in most the folks around here, 'cause y'all got your own place, and y'all ain't got a cowtail to a lot of this stuff. But you got to understand it ain't easy for sharecropping folks to do what you askin'." "Mr. Turner," Mama said in a whisper, "what if someone backed your signature? Would you shop in Vicksburg then?" Mr. Turner looked at Mama strangely. "Who'd sign for me? If someone would you do it?" Mr. Turner gazed into the fire, burning to a low ash, then got up and put another log on it, taking his time as he watched the fire shoot upward, and snuck in a log. Without turning around, he said, "When I was a wee little boy I got burnt real bad. It healed over, but I ain't never forgot the pain of it. It's an awful way to die." Then turning, he faced Mama. "Mis' Logan, you find someone to sign my credit, and I'll consider it deeply." As we left the Turners, Stacy asked, "Mama, who you going to get to sign?" But Mama, her brow furrowed, did not reply. I started to repeat the question, but Stacy shook his head, and I settled back wondering, then fell asleep.